What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. We are presented by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. Brendan Glasheen, joined by Sean Zerillo, Anthony DeBundo, and BJ Cunningham, a four-person show for our World Series preview episode. We're coming to you on a Thursday, October 26th. World Series starts Friday, the 27th. Tomorrow, we'll have Tanner McGrath and Charlie DiSturco joining the program. So we will get to game one of this World Series between the Diamondbacks and the Rangers in terms of best bets from Zerillo, DeBundo, and BJ. You can follow these guys in the Action app. They already have plays posted. Anything they add as the World Series unfolds, find them there. We are here for the rest of the week, and we'll be back Monday, Tuesday, as long as there's games going on. And even on those off days, we'll probably have preview shows, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't done so already, please leave a 5-star rating and review. We are handing out another free 1-year subscription to Action Pro at the beginning of next week. I think we'd get one more week out of this as long as the World Series is going on. Seeing how these playoffs have unfolded, who knows what we're going to get in this World Series between the Rangers and Diamondbacks. It still kind of feels weird to say those teams out loud. Without further ado, let's dive in. Rangers, Diamondbacks. Rangers are favorites to win the series, minus 174. D-backs hovering in that plus 145, plus 150 range. Zerillo, I'll go to you first. Just general thoughts. We'll go quickly around the horn here. Just general thoughts on the matchup when you look at lineup, starting pitching, bullpen, running game. How do you piece it all together?
So in terms of the lines, the props, the series price, the World Series odds, whatever you want to break it down by, but the overall series pricing seems about right to me. I made Texas about 60% for the series, so minus 152. So there is no value on either side of the series line. Arizona closer to being the value side. Saw some plus 155s out there. I'd want closer to about plus 165 to plus 170 in order to bet them to win the series. So pass for me are in the series pricing. Arizona closer to the value side. Again, no value in terms of like the Arizona minus or plus 1.5, Texas minus 1.5 games. All of the pricing on that seemed right to me. I made that about plus 133, minus 133 for Arizona plus 1.5. So again, no matter where you shop around, I saw Arizona plus 1.5 at like minus 145 and Texas minus 1.5 at about plus 120. So no value in those markets. Texas to 143, any of that stuff. In terms of breaking it down, I do think the starting pitching matchup is really close, if not would even give a slight edge to Arizona. It's very close. The bullpens too, very close. And I think in the bullpen game that we saw Arizona play out against the Phillies twice, particularly in game 4, though, I think if both teams need to go to a bullpen game in game 4, which is an issue for both teams, Texas would start presumably Andrew Heaney or Dane Dunning, piggyback the other. Arizona would just go full bullpen, right? I would give Arizona a bullpen advantage in that game 4. Now, whether they go to game 7 and do the same thing, or whether Texas potentially starts Nathan Eovaldi on short rest in game 4, and then again in game 7, or uses him out of the bullpen in game 7, all things to consider with how this might play out a little bit differently than we anticipate. But at the end of the day, I still think the pitching is fairly comparable. Brandon Pfaadt going against like a banged up Max Scherzer, right? That's a pretty close matchup. Gallen against Eovaldi. Kelly against Montgomery, I actually may give an edge to Kelly. So I have shown no value largely on this Rangers team throughout the playoffs, but once on them, once against them, but it's been pretty neutral, and I've been in alignment with the market with them all along. It comes down to their offense, and they actually project as a slightly better defensive team too than Arizona, which may not show up in the season-long numbers, but their lineup is better, their position players are better. I think the pitching is very comparable, and it's going to come down to whether Arizona can shut down this offense, because it is a deeper offense. They hit 1 through 9. Jonah Heim is good at cutting down runners. And we'll see whether Eovaldi can keep those runners in check, whether Dunning and the other guys in this rotation, Scherzer, can keep the runners in check. Because Arizona does need to continue to push itself on the base pass, probably, because they're at a power discrepancy in this matchup. So they're going to need Christian Walker to hit some home runs to stay in this series. They're going to need to find ways, to get runs on the board other than power, because Texas does have the power advantage. And I'm also curious to see, particularly in that game 3, we saw Brandon Pfaadt, right? We talked about it before. Game 7, Talked about it not as much before game 3, but it played out in game 3 where Brandon Pfaadt was just getting the Phillies to chase outside of the zone over and over and over again. And the 5 strikeouts that he got in game 7, all 5 of them were outside of the strike zone. He got a called strike low on Schwarber. The other 4 were chases and swings and misses over the top. So I'm curious to see how this Texas team approaches him and if they're much more patient with him and don't let him get those strikeouts on pitches outside of the zone. And I would tend to think that they would. This lineup has been very patient all postseason. They're very dangerous. They're deeper, as I said, compared to Arizona, but also they're just a little bit more patient and they take a lot of pitches. And I don't know if guys like Brandon Pfaadt are going to get those chases. I don't know if guys like Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, who throw a lot of pitches in the zone, if they're going to be able to get them by these Texas hitters. So, yeah, it just comes down to the offensive advantage, the lineup advantage that Texas has. I think Arizona can keep up with them in the pitching and maybe outpitch them, but I don't know if that's enough to overcome the offensive differential between these teams.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up chase rate because that allows me to introduce DeBundo. And now, Anthony, seeing that your Phillies are out and the Diamondbacks move forward, 2 teams that do chase in the Diamondbacks or they're just more aggressive, the Diamondbacks and the Phillies. What does that mean for the Diamondbacks and their pitching facing a Texas team, as Zerillo said, that's a lot more patient?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we go back and look at where we missed, right? Because like this podcast generally didn't believe much in Arizona. We kind of liked them against Milwaukee, but we didn't think they'd get past the Dodgers, especially Tanner. And I didn't think they'd get past the Phillies. I don't think any of us thought they'd get past the Phillies. Where did we miss? And I think it was very clearly not the Arizona offense, but the Arizona run prevention unit that we missed on, right? Like this bullpen that we said like, well, it was kind of a league average bullpen all year. Well, when they shortened up the bullpen, Ginkel and Sewald and Thompson are pretty elite back 3 righties that they had. And Ginkel and Sewald neither have allowed a run in the playoffs to this point. That's been really impressive to me. Also, did we miss on like just how good Gabriel Moreno is as a catcher? Because we know, and we said like, look, this guy is excellent as a framer. He's a good game caller. He controls the running game really well. But I think maybe we underestimated the game calling and just the pitching strategy that the Diamondbacks had to basically take apart the Phillies offense from games 3 to 7 outside of a couple of big home runs. So Moreno this season, when he started games, the Diamondbacks were a 60% win rate team. So you've heard a lot about how Arizona won 84 games, which is true. But they were 57-37 when Gabriel Moreno started games behind home plate. It's a pretty impressive record. And now in the playoffs, 9-3. So, when you look at, where we may have missed, I think that was it, right? Like this bullpen, when they trimmed it down and they added at the deadline with Thompson and Sewald and got Ginkel right after he was tipping in the first half of the season, they've got enough. And the Rangers in the same way, right? So like, did we overvalue how important it is to have a great bullpen? Because the Rangers have essentially rode 3 dudes, Spores, Chapman, and Leclerc, the whole playoffs. They have not really gone deeper than that. And when they have, it has not gone well for their bullpen. They've gotten pretty well rocked. So I think Zerillo's right, though. Like in a game 4, I actually like the Arizona pitching situation more because I actually think Castro, Frias, and even like a Mantiply are better than the guys that Texas has right now. So I think that's the great equalizer. 2 excellent catchers, 2 guys who are pretty good at pitching strategy with the Rangers and the D-backs here. What did we miss on the Rangers? I think it is the patience of their offense, waiting people out. The Diamondbacks were able to get the Phillies out. Phillies have been in a very aggressive lineup all season long. Top 7 in chase rate. They were willing to swing at pitches outside of the zone a lot. They tried to do damage early in counts. They are not a team that was going to work counts except for Schwarber and Harper. And those are the only 2 guys that really hit for the Phillies in the series. Now you fast forward, Texas just has a lot more options like Corey Seager, Evan Carter, Marcus Semien, even, to a lesser extent, Josh Young, like these, and Nate Lowe, like these guys all have excellent plate discipline. So it's going to be much harder, I think, for the, I'll say average stuff that Arizona has to play up against a lineup that is so much deeper than the Phillies right now. So overall, I don't really have a strong opinion on the series price either side. I think it's, kind of a game by game series, but I am concerned about Zach Gallen. I don't think he's got his best stuff right now. He threw a career high in innings by a long way this season. Now he's making his 5th playoff start on Friday night, and the stuff numbers just haven't been that impressive. You look at this stuff in the zone, like hasn't been getting whiffs. The Phillies struck out a lot games 3 to 7. The one game they did not strike out was the game 5 against Gallen. They were on him pretty well from the first inning. So I think there are some concerns about Gallen that, have to be monitored.
BJ, you were nodding your head when Zerillo brought up that the pitching is pretty comparable on both sides. So how does that factor into your handicap for the series?
Well, if you think about it, Eovaldi has obviously pitched very, very well during this playoffs, and you have to upgrade him a little bit because of those performances he's had. But given where he was over the second half of the season, coming off of that forearm injury, I mean, you have to have some still question marks or not rate him as highly as he's been after just a couple playoff starts. I get that Gallen has overperformed this season and his stuff really hasn't been that great. But I think Sean brought up a great point in Game 7 when we were talking about the Rangers and the Astros, and that the Rangers don't have a bridge from the starting pitching and that middle relief to get to those final 3 guys that Anthony mentioned. And I wonder what happens to the Rangers in this series if Eovaldi and Montgomery, and even Scherzer for that matter, can't get to 5 innings. If they can't get into that 6th inning and the Rangers middle relief has to be exposed to Arizona's lineup. That is where this goes wrong for the Rangers. And that's what Arizona really has to do. They have to work the counts. They have to get high pitch counts on these starting pitchers and get them out before the 4th and 5th inning, because the reality is that since the Rangers don't have that bridge, they're going to let Eovaldi and Montgomery consistently see the order the 3rd time through. Whereas Arizona, they have that bridge with Mantiply and Sal Frank to get to those back 3 guys that have been so impressive. So if you just look at it from the whole series, from the whole playoff perspective, the Rangers bullpen has a 5.45x FIP. Now the Diamondbacks are at 4.18. And even if you look at just the NLCS for Arizona, their bullpen gave up 12 earned runs. 6 of them came in the 10-0 blowout in Game 2. So their bullpen has been really, really impressive when they're able to strategize and use it correctly the way that they want to. So like Sean said, I almost would give Arizona an advantage here in terms of the bullpen. And then for starting pitching, Merrill Kelly has pitched really, really well. I'm looking at Game 2. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Jordan Montgomery probably should be a pretty significant favorite because of how well he's pitched in this playoffs. But there is one bet that I do like for this World Series. Now the Rangers obviously have a huge advantage offensively. Like there's no sugarcoating that. Like it's pretty massive. And that's why they're this big of favorites. But if you want to play this series and you're like, I don't really like the series price, like I don't really want to lay the huge number with the Rangers, or I'm not really, I don't really want to play Arizona. You can play, if you like Arizona here in Game 1, which I know Sean has already bet them and I have bet them as well. If you want to bet Arizona to win Game 1 and then Texas to win the series, there is a double price out there at plus 390. So as we go deeper into the series, and even in Game 3, where I think that Arizona does have a pretty big advantage given how well Fott has pitched so far in this playoffs, and then in Game 4, when you could give a bullpen advantage. But as we get deeper into these playoffs and the Diamondbacks have to face this Rangers lineup, a very deep lineup that can continually hit them, that is the worry. Can Arizona offensively keep up if the Rangers just keep hitting? So for me, the only thing I've played Arizona at plus 155 because I only made Texas 57% for the series to win it. So I had a pretty decent edge there. But again, if you like Arizona in Game 1 and you think that Eovaldi is overvalued and you still like the Rangers to win the series overall because of how good their offense is, I think plus 390 is a pretty good price on Arizona to win Game 1 and the Rangers to win the series.
Okay, good segue because we have you 3 today, Tanner and Charlie tomorrow. So let's dive into to Game 1 a bit here, Zerillo, with Eovaldi, Gallen, the pitching matchup. The line for tomorrow's game, Diamondbacks at BetMGM plus 140 on the money line, Rangers minus 165, totals at 8. I think you have a player prop that you like as well. One that just jumped out to me. I'm curious what you guys think. Zach Gallen, who's walked at least 2 batters in each of his 4 postseason starts, over 1.5 walks, is minus 150. And even going back to the end of the regular season, 7 of his last 8 starts, including the regular season and the postseason, he's walked at least 2 guys. But where are you going for Game 1 as far as your angles for this World Series?
So I made Texas minus 135 in Game 1. So I would bet Arizona plus 145 or better. You can find plus 145 if you shop around as high as plus 150. But not a play I love, just betting it off of the pricing. I've been on the Eovaldi first 5 since their first playoff game. I've generally been against Zach Gallen this season. So if I'm showing value on Arizona, there's probably value on Arizona. Now, looking at props, going a bit deeper into the matchup, still handicapping this, going through pitch types, arsenals for both pitchers. Anthony and I were talking right before we jumped on about game one umpire DJ Rayburn. Bigger strike zone than most. We've seen him in playoff games in the past. Get a little bit of Twitter heat if you just Google DJ Rayburn playoff strike zone. I'm sure you'll find some results from his past performances. That makes me less inclined to take the under on strikeouts for Eovaldi or Gallen in game one, less inclined to take the over on walks for Eovaldi and Gallen in game one. Those would be the directions I'd point. I think both of these guys are going to get a fairly long leash and pitch pretty deep into this game. So I generally like their over props, probably over on outs recorded for Eovaldi when that pops up. If it's 15.5, 16.5, it's where it starts to get questionable. But I think I'd bet over 15.5 on Eovaldi. But yeah, the walks and strikeout props with the umpire, the game one umpire in particular, makes it a little bit difficult to bet.
Okay.
The one angle I'm considering betting as of now, and you got to figure out how the Diamondbacks want to attack this Rangers lineup. Obviously, it's a very deep lineup, but they basically were bypassing Schwarber and Harper by the end of the series, and also Zach Gallen in particular, after he gave up the home runs to Schwarber and Harper in game one, stopped throwing pitches in the strike zone to Schwarber and Harper over the remainder of the series. The rest of the at-bats he had in game one, all of the at-bats in game five, he basically refused to offer them pitches in the strike zone. So to me, I think it's very possible that the Diamondbacks just look at Corey Seager and say, same deal with Harper, we're not going to let you beat us in this series. It's much more difficult when you have guys like Evan Carter and Adolis Garcia behind him in a much deeper lineup. But I think at some point, too, Gallen's probably going to look to pitch around Seager. And you'd rather attack Evan Carter, who has a bit less power, a lot of great plate approach, but a bit less power than Seager, and try to pound him in the zone and make him beat you than you would knowing Corey Seager, if you put a ball in the zone, is almost certainly going to beat you. So Seager to walk, plus 135. We were getting closer to about plus 180 earlier in that Rangers series, earlier in the Rangers-Astros series, until they started pitching around him a little bit. But even getting plus 135, plus 130, I got as high as plus 145 before game one. I like that down to about plus 120, even plus 115. Seager to get a walk in game one. Even with this bigger strike zone, I think there's a chance that Gallen continues to pitch around the lefties. So Seager, Evan Carter, those are probably the two guys I'd be most interested to walk, especially with the amount of full counts and 3-2 counts, 3-ball counts that Carter gets himself into. There's just a lot of potential for him to just grind out a walk by being patient with the way he approaches at bats. So Seager, Evan Carter, both to walk, I think, in game one. I'd rather bet those at plus money rather than betting Gallen over 1.5 walks at minus 140 or what have you. I think that's just a better approach, to take the plus money on the guys who he's likelier to walk.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Debundo, direction you might be heading in for game one, which again is Friday, game two Saturday, series shifts to Arizona Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. Of course, as long as the series continues. Debundo, game one angles. What do you got?
Yeah, I think, we don't have lines up yet as of Thursday, but I'm looking at pitching outs overs. You saw Zach Gallen in game one in Philadelphia struggle, right? Gave up 3 home runs in the first 2 innings, got in trouble in the fourth. And Lovullo did not even think about pulling him from that game until the end of the 5th inning, right? He was going to get those 5 innings out of him. So even if Gallen has to wear it a little bit, if he's not great, they're going to let him wear it because they can't overly tax the bullpen on the road in game one, knowing how long the series is. And I think the opposite is true, or the same is true in the opposite for the Rangers with Eovaldi. So I think Sean's directionally right there. Like, we don't have lines up yet, but even at 15.5, I think I'm over on Gallen and Eovaldi, because I think they will see the third time through, right? Like, as we get later in this series, I will be looking to play unders. I think there's a good chance that the market is still missing on just how effective the run prevention is for the Diamondbacks right now, and how good this high leverage is right now. But I think early in the series, when starters are going to have longer leashes and teams are going to punt more games, I'm going to be less likely to look to play unders. So I think right now, game one, no bet for me on the side or the total. Like I said, I'm kind of down on Gallen, but I still will be looking to play his over because I think he wears a bad outing if he's not great on Friday.
Yeah, I think until we get to the bullpen games at game 4, these starters go long, right? Like once you get to the bullpen games, all bets are off. And then you
I
have the
think
day in the middle
game
too.
3 would be interesting because you could start to
It's still, to me,
it.
it's still the first of 3 consecutive days of games.
Right.
And that's where it gets tough. Like you can't burn out the bullpen in game 3 for games 4 and 5. But yeah, like I know what you mean. That's where it starts to turn. But yeah, definitely games 1 and 2. I think overs are pretty much the only way to go. Like I wouldn't even consider unders for game 1 and game 2 pitchers.
I mean, the game scripts too are fascinating because that game 2 of the NLCS, the fact that the Phillies blew it open, the D-backs must be thinking, let's just survive and get through the night and save our high leverage arms. Like I think that played a part in it too, that they could preserve their bullpen to some degree. I know when you lose 10-0, you're going to have to go to some other arms, but at that point, you're just kind of punting on the game and moving forward to preserve going forward.
And that's kind of something, that's what, I mean, we did the game 3 pod and, I bet Arizona and I was like, I don't care if they won 2-0 or 10-0. Like none of the pitchers who gave up all the runs are going to pitch in this game for Arizona. So it doesn't really matter if the Phillies win by 100 or 10 or 2. So, it's a new day. Momentum is not real in baseball. I'm sorry. It's just not. Momentum, you could argue it's not real in sports at all. It's kind of just like a figment of people's imaginations, but like watch the games and figure out who's pitching the next day. And depending on how they pitch will determine who has the quote unquote momentum in a series. And, so if the Diamondbacks lose 8-0 in game 1, it has no bearing whatsoever on game 2, in my view. So that's just the reality of betting baseball.
The Altuve home run to extend the series with Texas. And then immediately, they falter in game 7. Like you would have assumed the Astros would win the series coming off of that drama, right? And anything but that. So I think
Phillies were the unbeatable champions of the world after game 2, and then their bats go quiet. So adjustments happen, and this Brent Strom, throwback to last season when we were like, hey, this guy's doing some good work with the Arizona pitching staff, and now it's like, well, they're in the World Series.
This is reminding me like an NBA comp, like LeBron James when he's in the NBA Finals. He just punts on game 1. It's a process game. It's like kind of that same thought process if it doesn't go well. But again, 10-0, quite drastic. I'm curious if the games are tighter and it's winnable. Is Lovello a little bit more aggressive? But you guys make good points.
I just want to make one more point before we throw it to BJ for his game 1 analysis. So rematch, right? Game 5, presumably we're going to get the same pitching matchup, Gallen and Montgomery, but in Arizona. So taking the derivative of this line with Texas at -160, Texas should be -115 on the road in game 5, and Arizona should be about closer to 48.6. Arizona should be closer to +105, +106. So -115 Texas, +105 Arizona, with Arizona at home in game 5, assuming we get the same pitching matchup. Just look out for those price targets. Texas is winning the series. Maybe you get closer to -125 and +115, and we get more value on Arizona there. So just keep an eye out on that game 5 line, assuming we get the same matchup.
Interesting. Okay. All right, BJ, what do you got? Game 1. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so I've already bet Arizona at +145, made the Rangers -120, -127 here. The one thing I'll say about Eovaldi, if you look at his splits throughout the whole season, he's been pretty bad against right-handed batters. 334 weighted on base average allowed to them, around 250 to lefties. Arizona is only going to have 2 lefties in their lineup to face him through this first game. So if you want an advantage for Arizona offensively, even though they haven't hit right-handed pitching that well throughout the whole season, that could be an angle of how they have success here. And again, like we've already mentioned, the back end, the 3 guys at the end of the bullpen for Arizona are really, really good. And even if they do let Gallen go a little bit longer, if they can just get to Ryan Thompson, Ginkel, and Seawald, I mean, those guys have been absolutely lights out. Now, obviously, the Rangers have a big-time offensive advantage, and Gallen hasn't been pitching very well, but I just think they're a little bit overvalued here, especially in game 1. So I took Arizona at +145.
Okay, real quick. Just curious if you guys have thoughts on World Series MVP, because I think that's a market that people are interested in, and they'll sink their teeth into that for the entire series. Corey Seager is your front runner at BetMGM +500. Adolis Garcia +600. Corbin Carroll +950. Marte +950. And then so on and so forth. Zerillo, any angle on MVP in terms of how the series might play out?
Nathan Eovaldi at around 18-1. I know I said I bet Arizona in game 1, but if the series does go 7 games, you're very likely to get Eovaldi pitching 3 times, likely in relief in game 7. There's a possibility that they pitch him on short rest in games 1, 4, and 7. I think it's likelier he starts games 1 and 5 and pitches out of relief in game 7 like he saw Jordan Montgomery do in the ALCS. So the blueprint's already there for Bruce Bochy. Start your game 1 starter, pitch him in relief in game 7. Pitches 3 times in the series. If he gets 2 wins, gets some strikeouts in game 7, absolutely capable of winning the award, and also a guy who racks up a lot of strikeouts too. The other guys I would take a look at, the other guy in particular I'd take a look at, probably Christian Walker or Lourdes Gurriel from the Diamondbacks. I think if the Diamondbacks are going to steal this series, didn't necessarily happen against the Phillies, but I think against the team with so much power like Texas, they probably need one of Gurriel or Walker to hit a few home runs in this series. And if they hit a few home runs, they should be very much within consideration of winning the award. So the 2 biggest power guys on their team, not necessarily the 2 guys at the top of the lineup, Ketel Marte and Corbin Carroll, who are going to be getting the hits and the steals, but the guys who can kind of match Texas in terms of the power output, maybe Christian Walker and Lourdes Gurriel. I think they have the most power on this Arizona team. So those are the 2 guys I consider poking for props, not only for MVP, but also maybe for home run leader or RBI leader for the series as well. And then Gabby Moreno to 22-1 for RBI leader for the series, I think is interesting. It's the amount of times that he could be hitting with Ketel or Corbin Carroll on second base. Should have a lot of RBI opportunities.
Okay. Tabundo, how about yourself? As far as it makes sense why, if it's going to be a Diamondback, it's probably going to be an offensive player. You got to really search for a pitcher like Merrill Kelly's plus 5,000. Same question as far as MVP or series leaders in the offensive department.
Yeah, I like the Moreno bet a lot, and that's one that I immediately popped on. Like if you watched how they started to change their approach against the Phils, it was if we get Marte or Carroll on first, we're going to be aggressive and try to steal second, and they were able to do that. Moreno puts a lot of balls in play. That is a major key. Also, Perdomo has been getting on base a good amount at the bottom of that lineup, kind of a switch guy that they can, grind out a couple of singles, get on base, and then wreak havoc on the bases. Like so,
he walks a lot, Perdomo.
Yeah, 3 speed demons in front of whatever you want to say of Ketel Marte. 3 guys who are plus speed on the bases in front of a guy who puts the ball in play a lot. So I think Moreno is absolutely the play there, especially if they're going to pitch around Seager and worry about Adolis. If they do that, then Seager is going to have very few RBI opportunities at the same level that he normally would. So it kind of does put a lot of pressure on Adolis Garcia, but he could just hit a bunch of home runs again and then win it. But at 22-1, I think Moreno is certainly the play. I have not bet the World Series market. I very rarely actually do it. I just think it's so incredibly random that you have to have a really good read on the script to figure out how this goes. And I don't have anybody who immediately pops out for me. Walker is interesting. He was really bad against high velocity against the Phillies. The Rangers don't have that same level of high velocity. Also, he didn't have problems with high velocity all year, so it's kind of weird that he just all of a sudden couldn't hit the high fastball anymore. So that will be interesting, especially if he gets some matchups with Chapman, which I do expect. He could hit a high-profile home run or 2. That would probably be his best way to impact this.
BJ, take us home.
Yeah, so it's just some historical context for the World Series MVP for people out there.
I like this. I feel like we're talking to Brandon Anderson now, giving us the breakdown.
So since 2000, 4 starting pitchers have won the award. It's Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling shared it in 2001. Josh Beckett in 2003 after pitching a complete game shutout against the Yankees in Game 6. Cole Hamels in 2008, Madison Bumgarner in 2014, and Steven Strasburg in 2019. And one thing that I looked at when I was looking at all the hitters historically who have won it and everything, since 2000, only 3 hitters who were on the winning team and won the award did not lead their team and weighted on base average during the World Series. It was Ben Zobrist in 2016, David Eckstein in 2006, and Manny Ramirez in 2004, which the Red Sox swept the Rockies and hit everything. So it was kind of just take your pick at that point. So if you're looking for somebody on both teams, obviously it's Corey Seager, Adolis Garcia, Marcus Semien for the Rangers. For the Diamondbacks, the 3 guys who led them and weighted on base average during the regular season were Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, and Christian Walker. During the postseason, Ketel Marte has a 416 weighted on base average. That is by far and away the best on the Diamondbacks from this. And to Sean and Anthony's point, Gabriel Moreno is 3rd, and Perdomo, I believe, is fourth on the Diamondbacks. So if you want to take a long shot, those two guys are in that type of range where they can cause some havoc. Also, Moreno, 9 RBIs, leads the Diamondbacks this postseason. So that RBI bet for 23-1 is fantastic. Marte, I really like Marte for World Series MVP and to lead the World Series in hits. You can find MVP at 10-1. You can find hits at 11-1. He's a switch hitter, so there's not going to be no split advantage either way because he's got over a 350 weighted on base average versus both lefties and righties, and he's going to be at the top of the order. Obviously, has been their best offensive player so far in this entire postseason. So I think he should probably be the favorite if you're picking somebody from Arizona over Corbin Carroll to be the favorite to win the World Series or to win the MVP for them. So at 11-1, again, it's probably not going to be a starting pitcher from the Diamondbacks that wins World Series MVP for them. So if you're looking for a hitter, Perdomo, Moreno, or Marte, I think are your three options or best options for Arizona. And so also some historical context. I would not take a reliever. Only 2 relievers have ever won the World Series MVP. It was Mariano Rivera in 1989 and Raleigh Fingers in 1974. So I don't think we have a Mariano Rivera, Raleigh Fingers type reliever in the back end of these bullpens who can honestly win that award. And given how, offensive it looks like this series is going to potentially be, that's probably not going to happen. So just, I would tell people to steer away from a reliever. And so we'll all be celebrating Paul Sewald winning the World
I would
Series.
love that.
I was going to say that would be a hell of a story considering that they got him at the deadline and he probably thought before he got traded, he was going to be in the playoffs with the Mariners. And there he was closing out game 7 of the World Series. NLCS.
Yeah, he'll get 4 games, 4 saves, not allow a hit, strike everybody out, and he'll be MVP.
My reliever who would win the MVP would be Ryan Thompson. Because he's the guy who's going to go 2 innings for them. So if he goes 2 innings 3 separate times and shuts all of them down, it's possible he gets a couple wins in the series. But yeah,
is there a market offer on Ryan
bet
Thompson
a relief pitcher to win MVP? It
MVP?
would be Ryan Thompson just because of the usage and the longevity.
Is there a market up on Ryan? This is like a Ranger Suarez, Colin Whitchurch level handicap. I feel like when he picked Ranger Suarez, he's like, well, Ranger Suarez will pitch in the World Series.
I'll have to look, but there are no only relievers that are up right now are Spores and Leclerc. They're both 250-1.
I'm sorry to rub it in, DeBundo. That dude Ginkel was a badass in that game 7. I mean, he came in and was lights out. I would love to see him get more opportunities in high leverage situations, which probably will happen.
Here's the thing, right? And this is the beauty of the sport. He threw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball right down the middle in a 2-1 count to Bryce Harper.
And he didn't swing.
No, he swung. He hit it. 100. I think it was 109 off the bat, 44-degree launch angle. And Bryce Harper talked about it after the game, and he was like,
"Was that to left center? Was that the left center one?
He hit one to the wall in the 5th inning off Mantiply.
Right.
He hit one. It was a routine fly to center for Thomas.
Yes.
Right. So it's the 7th inning, and it's a much worse pitch than the one that Harper hit the home run on last year off Robert Suarez. That was a great pitch that he threw to Harper. And he said, he beat my barrel by less than 1/10 of a second. And if he gets if it's a 35-degree launch angle instead of a 44-degree launch angle, the Phillies lead 5-4 and the game's probably over with Wheeler on the mound. So that's the beauty of the sport. And, he threw it right down the middle. And that's not something I would recommend to Bryce Harper, but give him credit. Big balls, Ginkel. To do that at Bryce Harper with 2 guys on in the bottom of the 7th, leading by 2 runs and 2 outs in the biggest game of his life. So, yeah, Ginkel was money. Then the 8th inning, he came in and just murdered our 3, bad hitters right now that wanted to swing at everything. So, yeah, credit to him. But, yeah, that was the moment, right? Like, Harper hits the ball off the bat. You could tell he missed it. But, like, if he gets a little more of it, it's gone. So, that's the beauty.
Game 4 was the moment. I'm tired of people talking about game 6 and 7. They blew the series in game 4.
Yep.
That too.
They blew the series
5-2 in the 7th inning.
I'm so sick of people talking about game 6 and 7 and they choked at home. They lost the series in game 4. They were winning that game. It was over. That was the series.
Yeah, Arizona deserved to win game 6 and 7. It's not like the Phillies blew it.
The Phillies blew game 4. Blew it. Yeah. They choked.
I think people would. I mean, look, on one front, like the Phillies scored 3 runs with a lot of money invested in their lineup in the 2 closeout games at home. So as bad as game 4 was, and I agree, that's when the series was lost. they had 2 chances in their ballpark, of which they have not lost a game all playoff. They were 6-0 at the bank this postseason, winning almost all the games by a lot of runs. And it just the offense just disappeared.
And the other moment was in Game 7, Anthony, when they pulled out Ranger for Hoffman, and I literally texted you, and now Carroll is going to steal, and Hoffman never looked over at him, never threw over, but never even looked at him. And he stole and scored the tying run, winning run at that point. So
it was the go-ahead run. Yeah, 3-2.
Yeah, it was like the most obvious stolen base situation of all time. The moment you pull Suarez out, and they never even looked over at him. I don't know who that's on, if that's on Hoffman, if that's on JT, if that's on the advanced scouting staff. But my God, that was the most obvious steal situation of all time.
And they let Suarez face Carroll 3 times, which I thought was bad too. But that's enough about the Phillies.
I wasn't sure we were going to get there in this episode, but there it is, everybody. Your Action Network Phillies postmortem on the World Series preview episode.
Opening day. Yeah, you want to guess who comes to Philly opening day next year?
Oh my God. Who?
The Atlanta Braves. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like a celebrity or something to make you all feel better.
No.
You meant the schedule. Got it.
Yes.
Okay. That's enough of that. Zerillo, as you said, you've got your preview coming out in the app, actionnetwork.com. So stay tuned for that. On the written side of things, you can find Zerillo, Dabundo, and BJ Cunningham individually in the free award-winning Action Network app. These guys will be available to you in that way. We will be back next week, of course, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So including tomorrow, 4 more days, 4 consecutive weekdays of Payoff Pitch here on the podcast front. We've got Charlie and Tanner joining me tomorrow for their World Series Game 1 best bets. Again, Game 1 going down tomorrow just after 8:00 Eastern in Arlington. That's going to do it for our World Series preview. For Zerillo, Dabundo, and BJ Cunningham, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast presented by BetMGM. Back with you tomorrow for Game 1 previews. Talk to you then.